Okay, so everybody was able to access the feedback from the first homework assignment, right? So yeah, by and large, like as a group, like for the first assignment, you guys did just fine, right? There are a couple of things, right, like that I do want to note. Like again, like I want to remind people to pay attention to the number of the assignment that you're doing and to the page number, right? If I say do assignment 1, right, just do the assignment labeled number 1. Also, I didn't. I noticed that nobody did it in Times New Roman 12-point double-spaced font, and I realized this is because I never asked you to do that, and that while that might be like my default, I understand that it's not your default. So I didn't take any, I didn't take any points off for form or anything like that anyway, right? Yeah, just in the future, please submit all assignments in Times New Roman 12-point font double-spaced, in part because this is academic standard, right? This is what people working in universities use. Also because it's a hell of a lot easier to read on a screen. And when I see a lot of like little tiny dark print, I'm a good bit older than you and it hurts my eyes. So, the other thing that I want people to pay more attention to in the future, paragraphing. Right. Does anyone know why paragraphs exist? Why we split pieces of writing up into paragraphs? Yeah, exactly. Every time, right? Yeah, if you're moving on to a new topic, right, starting a new paragraph signals to the reader that that's what you're about to do. So if I'm just reading a great big block of undifferentiated text, right, it's hard for me to know when you're moving on to a new idea. If you're properly paragraphing, then I can tell when you're shifting gears, right? So think of paragraphing as a kind of service to your reader, right? Everything you do should be geared towards making it easier for your reader to understand your argument, right? Does anybody have any questions about the homework? Yeah, Henderson.
Do you prefer, like, I know to upload the scratch work, there was like, so you upload the document and then there's like an additional file you could put. That's what I did.
Okay.
But I guess it didn't like show up on there. Would you rather just like in the Google Doc or whatever form you're doing it, just put the picture at the bottom, that way like it's on there just to make sure?
Yeah, that's probably, but yeah, so yeah, because if you, it seems like attaching an additional file doesn't actually do anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to like mess up my paper.
Wait, y'all didn't work?
I don't think so.
I'd download it to my computer first.
Can we like put it as a picture in the comment area? Because the first assignment I was able to like get the link for the picture and put that in the comment area, but it wasn't working for some reason for the second one. So I just like copied the picture and pasted it, put my own.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, however you can get it to work. I don't really fully understand how Georgia View works because it's not like, that's not really my area. I teach English. This is an IT thing. But I do know that Georgia View, I think we use Georgia View mostly because it's cheap. And so sometimes it gets a little wonky. But yeah, no, if you submitted something and it didn't come through for whatever reason, right, tell me, right? Most of the time I'll give, like, unless you give me a reason not to, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. Particularly if you can then provide the thing that, that's missing. Any other questions about the homework? Does anybody have any questions about the homework that's due tonight?
It's due tonight?
Yes.
I thought it was due tomorrow.
It's due tonight. And Jen, it's due the same day we have class.
Okay.
So, yeah, and like if there is a discrepancy between what it says on Georgia View and what I say in class, always go with what I say, right? Because Georgia View is just software, and sometimes it screws up the dates that I put in there, and I don't know why, right? There are things going on in that program that as I said, I really don't understand. And so sometimes, even if I enter the calendar stuff correctly, it comes out wrong, and I don't know why. And it makes me angry and frustrated. But yeah, so just just go with what I say in class. Everybody has the article, right, that I wanted you to look at for this assignment?
Mhm.
Okay,
There you go.
good. Okay, just wanted to make sure. All right, so I want to start today with just a kind of a little bit of thinking practice. So if you can turn to page 25 in the textbook. We have a list of statements here, all of which imply one or more ideas, right? So let's go back to what we were doing the last couple of sessions. And what do we mean by implications? What is an implication?
Something that's like briefly explained, but it's not like, you have to read like more into it.
Yeah, an implication is like a premise that's not clearly stated, right? Right, something that is clearly part of the text you're reading. It's clearly an idea that it wants to convey, but it's not one that's conveying openly, right? So, for example, if I give you, say, something like this. This is from an old advertisement. A bigger burger is a better burger. The burgers are bigger. At Burger King. What's implied?
The Burger King's better.
Yeah, that the burger is also better, right? They don't say it, but it's what they mean, right? So let's try a couple of these and see where we can get with them. Let's start with the first one here, right? The sidewalk is disappearing as a feature of the American residential landscape. So take a minute, think about this, and think about what this implies. One thing that might help would be to break down any key words here, right? Think about the connotations that particular words carry with them. And remember that there may be multiple reasonably good answers, right? You're not looking for one right or wrong answer. So if you can think of a couple of things that this might imply, so much the better. And when you feel like you have something, just go ahead and speak up.
I said how, like nowadays, Americans, they want as much landscape as possible to show like how much money they have and how nice like their home is.
Okay.
So, yeah, getting rid of a sidewalk is like a feature, and like a feature is kind of like when you're like looking to buy a new house, they're like, the features are a pool, a bonus room. It's like, it's just kind of weird if features turning into, there's no sidewalk in the front. In most like
Okay.
suburban areas, it's pretty normal.
Yeah, so people want more room for display. Okay. And the home, as a kind of, so the suburban home in particular is a symbol of a particular kind of wealth and prosperity, right? Okay, good. What else? What else did y'all come up with?
I had just said a part of the American residential landscape is just in here. Like, when they're saying that the sidewalk is a feature of it, like, I feel like it's saying that that's a part of the landscape.
Yeah, so you see, yeah, sidewalks used to be part. I think what it's saying is that sidewalks used to be an important part of the American residential landscape, right? And you can actually kind of see it if you look here in Americus, right? If you look like around downtown and the historic district, there are sidewalks all over the place, right? But once you leave the historic districts, there are no sidewalks, right? Why are there sidewalks in the older parts of town and not the newer parts of town?
Like also technology, like pretty much everyone has a car nowadays, and like back in the day,
Mhm.
you lived downtown because that's all you needed to get around was downtown.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, so there are two things I think that you kind of hit on there, right? One is that people now live further from where they work, right? Or shop. And if you live further from where you work or shop, what are you probably going to do less of?
Walk.
Yeah, you're not going to walk as much, right? So we've got a couple of interesting things here that if we wanted to do a kind of deeper analysis of this, we could work with, right? We have, the idea of private space taking over public space, right? The lawn spilling over onto what used to be the sidewalk where everybody could walk, right? Becoming part of a private lawn instead. You have, because people are more spread out, right? The fact that it's becoming less practical to walk to get around, right? Therefore, sidewalks become less necessary for people, right? Okay, good start. Let's move on to number 3 here. Let's have a look at this one. Good fences make good neighbors. This is from a poem by Robert Frost. So, just think really hard about, what a fence does, what neighbors are, and what this implies makes either of them good, right? And again, just speak up when you think you got something.
I said a good fence is tall and it doesn't show through and it keeps other things out.
Okay.
Privacy.
Okay, yeah, a fence gives you privacy, right?
Especially if you got some like nosy neighbors.
What's that?
I say, especially if you got like nosy neighbors. My neighbors be peeping over my fence.
Uh-huh. Well, then what does a nosy neighbor not respect? What does a nosy neighbor not do?
Respect privacy.
Exactly. A nosy neighbor doesn't respect your privacy, right? So what does a good neighbor in this sentence do?
Mind their business.
Yeah,
Stays in their lane.
minds their own business. Yeah, exactly, right? So the implication here is that good relationships between neighbors, right, require respect for boundaries and respect for privacy, right? All right, let's try another one. Let's go to number 6 here. Shopping malls and grocery stores rarely have clocks. Yeah.
I'd say like most of the time when you go to like the mall or like the grocery store,
Mm-hmm.
you don't really have like a set time of how long you're gonna be there or how short it's gonna be or whatever.
Okay.
But like not having a clock and makes you not think about time, so you tend to spend more money and look around more.
Okay. Yeah, the implication here is if people who aren't worried about time
Do I have what else this one?
will spend more money. Good. Anything else? What else do we know about shopping malls and grocery stores? What else do they not tend to have?
I don't pay that much attention.
Exactly, right? That's part of the point, right? So, there's no...
This looks good, so I'm looking.
What's that?
I'd be like, oh,
Yeah.
that looks good.
Uh-huh.
Thanks.
But think about what a shop like a shopping mall is, right? Is there any connection in a mall usually to the outdoors?
Not really.
Not in the stores, I think visually.
Yeah, it's basically like it's an indoor shopping space, right? It's usually enclosed, right?
Yeah.
How many of even the stores have windows?
None of them.
Yeah, maybe like the big, like if it has like a big anchor department store, right, there might be like a window facing out into the parking lot, right? But yeah, most of the stores don't have windows either. So, why do you think, how might that be related, like the lack of windows, how might that be related to the lack of clocks?
You can't see it, it's getting dark.
Sightseeing.
Yeah, it's like going to the movie theater at like 6,
Uh-huh.
and you get out there at like 9, and you're like, what happened?
You're a little disoriented,
Yeah,
right, when you come
weird.
out, right?
Yeah, that's weird.
But yeah, there is a kind of like disorienting time effect that happens in one of these kinds of places, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that there's an implication here, right, that if you're not thinking about the outside world, you'll lose track of how much time and money you're spending. All right, because that disorientation effect when you come out of one of these places is real, right? Especially if the level of light is different from what it was when you went inside, right? So like if you go in at noon and you don't come out till say 7 and the sun's coming down, right? It feels weird, it makes you feel off, right?
Yeah.
So there's an implication here that they're doing this to you on purpose, that they want you to feel disoriented. Okay, let's go up a second here. I also want to take a quick look at number 4, right? This one's a little long, so I'm not going to write it out on the board for you. But it's an increasing number of juveniles, people under the age of 18, are being tried and convicted as adults rather than as minors in America, with the result that more minors are serving adult sentences for crimes they committed while still in their teens. So just take a minute with this and pull out what's implied here, right?
I would say like the crimes themselves, like what they commit, like the crimes that they commit, honestly, has a part in how they're tried in court.
Okay, so one implication could be the juveniles are committing more serious crimes, right? Okay.
Because like you don't see like a school shooting that's basically like 30, because most of them went to the school and they're like 17. 18.
Right. It's mostly like a student who has a connection to the school, right? Yeah. Okay.
They know what they're doing, they know where they are.
Yeah, but that's also like while those get a lot of attention, right? That's also only a very small number
Yeah.
of the overall number of arrests in the U.S., right?
Mhm.
So let's think about what else. So I think that is one implication is the juveniles might actually be committing more serious crimes, right?
Yeah.
What other implications might we pull out of this?
I mean, I've kind of seen like a repetition, like it
Okay.
states like basically 3 times about being teenage, like
Mhm.
trying to, like it's like a string almost. And like,
Okay.
It's just repeating that they're teenagers, so they should be treated differently than as an adult. It's just obvious, but it's
Okay.
just, they said it 3 times. So.
Okay, yes. So you think there's an implication here that there's something weird about treating teenagers as though they're adults. Okay. What might this imply about, say, like general attitudes towards crime in the United States at the time this was written?
Like it starts when you're young. So if you shut it down when you're young, then you probably won't have problems after that.
Okay, that maybe there's a theory that stopping people when they're young or arresting people when they're young will stop them committing more serious crimes later, right? But kind of like, what about like are there any implications regarding like American levels of tolerance for crime? If we're sentencing more juveniles as adults, what does that suggest about trends towards sort of like crime and punishment and sentencing in the U.S.?
You know, they're like tired of dealing with it, so they're trying to make trying to like punish them more, I guess.
Yeah, that they're trying like a tough on crime kind
Yeah.
of approach, right? That, you know, if we, yeah, 'cause does it say that more juveniles are being arrested? No, so yeah, but it doesn't say anything about the rate of juvenile crime here, right? Having changed. Just that the sentencing is changing. Now, let's try to pair this with what it says in number 5 here, right? And let's see how we read number 4 then in light of number 5, right? Neuroscientists tell us that the frontal cortex of the brain, the part that is responsible for judgment and especially for impulse control, is not fully developed in humans until roughly the age of 21. So how would that then affect the way we read number 4, right? What implication would that add to it?
That young teenagers can't control their impulses.
Yeah, that people are being punished essentially for having poor impulse control, right? That they're being punished as adults, like that teenagers are less, the implication is whether you agree with it or not, right, is that teenagers are less culpable than adults for crimes they commit because they have a diminished capacity for thinking through consequences and, controlling their impulses, right? Okay, so we understand how this works, right? And again, like this is what you should be doing kind of with everything that you're reading. Now, what I'd like to focus on today is taking what you're reading and putting it into a context, right? Now, we have already done some of this in previous sessions, right? So, for example, when we looked at the John Prine song last time, right, your flag decal won't get you into heaven anymore. What context did we use for understanding that?
We picked out words and tried to. We picked out words and explained what the words meant.
Okay, it might help if we're maybe more clear on what we mean by context. We're talking about context. If we're placing something into a context, what does this mean? What does this mean we're looking at it in terms of?
Like for what it's meaning, like for what it's saying, like it's worth, not like.
Not quite. So when we talk about a context, what we're talking about is the kind of surrounding circumstances, right? We're reading it in terms of a certain set of circumstances that help us understand how it relates to its environment or to a particular philosophy or a particular political persuasion or a particular moment in time, right? So, for example, we remember that the John Prine song was written and recorded in 1971, right? And then what was going on in 1971? That was probably relevant to the song. Yeah, exactly. So if we choose the Vietnam War as a context for understanding the argument in the song, right, then we're reading it through the lens of history. With the Monty Python sketch, we were looking at that in terms of the context we chose for that was a particular human relationship context, right? You know, the relationship between shopkeeper and customer, right? So putting something into a context helps us to resolve ambiguities in whatever it is we're reading. And it helps us to, you okay?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so it helps us to resolve ambiguities, and it gives us a good starting point for pulling implications out of our observations, right? So I'm going to pass out to you a document from early American history.
Thank you.
Mhm. So what we have here is the text of the Mayflower Compact. Do one of you know what the Mayflower Compact is or was?
Yeah, like so.
It was like the first like official document they wrote before they like made like real governments and all that stuff. Like just so everybody was on the same page while they're still setting up the communities.
Yeah, okay, so yeah, it's an agreement amongst a group of settlers, right? To, follow a particular set of, to essentially to create a governing body, right? For their colony. Now, if we think about this contextually, right? Who were the people who drew up the Mayflower Compact? Does anybody know?
I think the people in England actually made it, the people that were in America settling, right?
Yeah, okay, so yeah, it was a group of English settlers, right? Who came over to what is now Massachusetts in 1620, right? Ringing a bell?
Yeah.
Okay.
Funny.
Yeah, so the Mayflower Compact, right? So the people who came over on the Mayflower, right, were the people who come to be known in American history as pilgrims, right? Does anybody remember why they came to Massachusetts, or at least the reason that we usually understand for them coming over from England?
Like I'm trying to escape the
What-
religious person.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, the usual explanation given, right, is religious freedom, right? And of course, I only brought one marker today, and it is starting to fail me. Okay, so I want you to look at this document, and I want you to keep this particular context in mind, right? That we've got a group of religious dissidents coming over from England to settle in North America in 1620. And for now, just kind of keep that in the back of your minds, right? And I want you to do the usual observation work here, right? Look for patterns of repetition, right? Look for strands, and look for patterns of opposition. Look for binaries. And just take a few minutes and tell me what you come up with. Yeah, Trinity.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, guys. Yeah. You don't need to ask to use the restroom. You can just go. but keep at it for now. I'll be right back.
There's no green one.
It's religious. It is, it says, in the name of God, by grace of God, by glory of God. In the presence of God. It's like, this is like their Bill of Rights compared to. I'm just not gonna answer any questions. Is that thing really too smart? They don't trip in. I'm stressed. We have to run today at practice. I bet you $5 million that we're running a practice. Because she found out that none of us did the wrong in our fitness packet. For weights, it was literally like, it wasn't even a damn wrong.
So which is on this page nine?
Huh?
Which one?
You talking about
The second one.
Yeah.
Page 68.
Page 68.
Yeah.
Dude, she owns half of her shit.
Oh god, it's so much.
This page, the 60,
It's
that thing is very
not-
long.
Dude, come on.
I can argue, but I'm not gonna argue like that.
I think it's all about
Judge Edward,
Wednesday.
and then just like,
They
oh,
do
I
not
don't be like
do
this.
this tomorrow night.
It's Thursday's gonna be absolutely hell.
Yeah, I'm gonna be crazy.
The page 68, the 500, everything else 68.
He put on a more like
It's-
last
It's
week.
like an article that he sent us the email, and we have to like pick a paragraph and
Like-
analyze it basically.
Yeah, all the assignments are on here. He was just saying like her due date was wrong.
It's,
Let's do this.
Everything's due the day of class.
So the assignment I was emailing you about, I was doing today.
It's due today, yep.
Looks like I'll be doing that and studying all. I do 4 hours.
I always thought I was due like the night before class. So I was like rushing to
Well,
go.
good for you then.
I still ain't got my biology book figured out.
I got mine. It's heavy. Pearson wants me to create an account, but I've already, already have an account. They're like,
Yes, Carmen.
It's not the best, but for the tutoring session thing, like, how do we do that? Like, I don't even know where it takes place at.
Writing Center? Is that what you're asking about?
Yeah, it's like for,
It's not,
it's like this writing center thing that we have to go to at least one of them, and then it's like tutoring sessions that we have to go to.
What are we doing? We have to go.
It was like
Not for this class.
No, not for this class, for, I guess for the first one.
Okay, you can come ask me after class.
Okay.
We can talk about that. Yeah, just, for the moment, just try to focus on what we're doing here. Let's take a couple more minutes with it. Take 2 more minutes with this. Okay, so let's pause here. So first off, I know that it seems like sometimes I'm asking you to stare at something like this for a rather long time. There are a couple of reasons for this. One is that not everybody reads and thinks at the same speed, right? So I'm trying to give everybody a chance to think through the reading, right? The other thing is that generally speaking, good thinking is slow thinking. And slow, sustained attention to something is going to help you pull more out of it, right? Usually our first impulses when we're reading something or looking at a picture are superficial and won't really help us dig too deeply under the surface of what we're reading. So the longer we're looking at something, the more likely it is that patterns are going to start emerging for us, right? The more times we read over the same little block of text, the more likely it is we're going to see something interesting in it, right? So that is why we are sort of like doing slow thinking exercises here. Now, let's talk about what you guys were able to pull out of this. What did you get from this? What binaries or strands do you notice here?
I put a strand that they mentioned, like God a lot, and that they were doing it like for the grace of God, the glory of God. Like they mentioned doing it for God a lot.
Okay. So, yeah, it's not just God, but it's like always some action, something in relation to God, right? So we've got name of God, right? Grace of God,
Glory of God.
glory of God,
Presence of God.
presence of God. Good. Now, is there another pattern of language that's related to this? Are there other things that we can kind of put in the same category here?
Maybe for the king.
Yeah, the Lord King James.
Okay.
And I thought it was interesting that it was like the beginning and the end. It was stated twice that like where they're from,
Uh-huh.
and, like what morals or conducts or rulers they're coming from.
Okay. What I was asking you guys to do actually was sit with this one a little longer first, though, right? Do we see other things that are related to religious language here?
Defender of the faith.
Okay, defender of the faith, yeah.
Christian faith.
Yep. Good. Advancement of the Christian faith.
Did the civil body politic go in that or no?
Civil body politic, probably not, right? I think that's more political language than religious language, right? Although I think as we look at this, we're going to see that those two kind of blend together here, right? And I think one place where we can see that, right, is where we've got our sovereign Lord King James here, right? And what is one of the titles they give to him? Defender of the faith, yeah. This is one of the titles that is officially attached to the British crown, right? So, our sovereign Lord King James is, in addition to all these other things, defender of the faith. Right? The faith, in this case, being specifically, right, Anglican Christianity. Because in addition to being the monarch of Great Britain, what else is the British ruler the head of? Does anybody know? Yeah, the Church of England, right? Now, what other language might we associate with the king here? If we sort of like make a list of language that is related to king or politics or government, what might be put under that?
Like from this?
Yeah.
I don't know if this is related, but the having undertaken for the glory of God, it's like almost like he's a descendant of like the power that he possesses from like God, directly from God.
Well, who has undertaken this voyage for the glory of God? Has the king undertaken it? No, it's
No.
yes, the colonists who have undertaken it, right? So that sentence, I admit, is a little hard to parse, right? 17th century political prose is a little difficult, right? I will grant that. But what else there seems to relate to politics?
Covenant and combine.
Okay, covenant and combine, yeah. Good, what else? What's that? Constitution, good. What's that? Laws,
Acts.
acts, and ordinances, yep.
Offices.
Offices, right? We're really pulling as much as we can out of that sentence. What about the way the colonists are depicting their relationship with the king? What do they describe themselves as?
Loyal subject.
Yeah, loyal subjects, right? Loyal subjects of our dread sovereign. Right. They talk about submission and obedience, right? So we've already noticed that there's some running together of religious and political language here, right? You know, first in the reference to King James as defender of the faith, right? But also in the use of a word like covenant, right? In describing the agreement that they're coming up here, that they're coming up with here, right? Right. This is right a covenant. You know, like the word being reminiscent then of like you know God's covenant with Abraham, right? God's covenant with Noah, right? These kinds of agreements that God makes with the people in the Hebrew Bible, right? So, if we're looking at this as a kind of American founding document, right? How does this differ then from most of our other founding political documents? If we're looking at it through that lens.
But that's kind of like compared to like our, like,
Yeah, if we compare this like to the like to the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, right?
I feel like those are more like rules numbered, or this
Okay.
is like just a general like, this is what we're gonna do.
Okay, yeah, this is a general statement of purpose, right? You know, we're going to set up a colony and we're going to do this for it, right? But what is all over the place here that is largely missing from, say, the Constitution and Bill of Rights? Is there, for one thing, is there any mention of rights here? In fact, what do they refer to themselves as? They refer to themselves as citizens.
A subject.
Yeah, we're subjects, right? We're subjects of the king.
it's like they don't have a choice but
Yeah.
to follow those.
Yeah, and that's that. Like, they're right. These words do mean something different. A citizen has rights and responsibilities, right? A subject only has responsibilities. A subject has duties that they must perform towards the ruler, right? And they are subject to the will of the ruler. So there's no talk of rights here. What is one of the things that the First Amendment guarantees us that might be relevant to this? Free speech, freedom of speech, and... Okay, and what else does the First Amendment guarantee? What things are separated from each other in the First Amendment?
Religion.
Yeah,
Church and government.
separation of church and state, right?
Close enough.
I'm struggling with that. I was like,
I know, yeah, it's like I know it's early, guys, right?
yeah, I was trying to say guns.
But yeah, this is the Second Amendment is an entirely different ballpark here, right? But yeah, freedom of speech is part of the First Amendment, right? But
They need that.
what's that?
I said they need that.
But yeah, there's clearly no idea of separation of church and state here, right? They're very, very much closely intertwined, right? So if we're looking at this in terms of American founding documents, this is an anomaly, right? If that's our context. Now, what if we're looking at this in this original historical context that we set up, right? Does this sound like an agreement that is drawn up by a bunch of religious dissidents who are trying to flee from oppression?
Not really. They seem happy in the thing.
Yeah, or at the very least, obedient, right?
Yeah.
Right? They clearly still regard themselves as English and as subjects of the king, right? Whether or not, they are members of the Church of England. And they even seem to be willing to grant him his religious authority here, right? So then what might this suggest about the usual context in which we talk about the Pilgrims and their emigration to the United States, or their colonization of what is now the United States? Was there anything else, by the way? Did you guys notice where they said they're settling?
Yeah, Cape Cod.
Virginia.
Yeah.
Northern Virginia.
Yeah, they know they're on Cape Cod, or what they come to call Cape Cod, right? But they talk about settling the northern part of Virginia. Does anybody know why they would say that? Or have any idea why they would say that?
Didn't they have already found Virginia and they were going north of it? They thought it was northern Virginia.
Exactly, yeah. That was the only existing English colony in North America at the time was in Virginia, right? So they're not calling their colony Massachusetts Bay yet. For one thing, they don't know, they've not yet made contact with Native American groups, so they don't yet know that they call the place Massachusetts, right? But yeah, they're thinking of this entirely in terms of right, English colonial settlement. So this doesn't quite seem, as we've noticed, right, this doesn't seem to quite sit comfortably with the usual narrative of, these, oppressed religious dissidents coming to the United States to be free, right? There's no language of freedom in this. And they seem to be following what was then the English regular practice of combining church and state. So we can determine from this that the idea of separation of church and state is something that develops later, right? That this is not something that's present in 1620 when these people are coming over. And that this is a group of people who still very much see themselves as English, right? Not as Americans. So what we want to do then, the next step we want to take this in, right? If we're trying to build an interpretation on this context, is to think about what the planting of an English colony means to these people, right? What's the point of planting an English colony in the northern parts of Virginia? What do they claim they're doing?
Maybe land.
They are. That is literally what they're doing, right?
Advancing the Christian faith.
Yes, they're advancing the Christian faith. So they seem to see this as a missionary pursuit, right? And what else do they seem to think they're doing?
Combining themselves together as a.
They covenant to combine ourselves together into a civil body politic for our better ordering and preservation and furtherance of the ends aforesaid. Right? So ordering and preservation, I think, are important words here as well. Because again, like, are these words that we typically associate with ideas of freedom or liberty? What does this group seem to favor over liberty?
Rules and laws.
Rules, laws, order, right, yeah. And there is a school of thought that says that human liberty comes from having clear and fair rules and laws and order, right? But there's no mention of that kind of thinking here, right? Right? This is rules and safety or survival, right? I think it's worth noting again, too, the ideas of advancement of the Christian faith and honor of our king and country are separate clauses in the same sentence, right? That they don't think of these two things as being separate, right? They mention advancement of the Christian religion first, but honor of our king and country comes right after, right? So these two things are still very closely linked for them. So, what we're doing in laying all of this out, right, is coming up with a reading of it that we can then use to try to build an interpretation. And so far what we've got is that we've got a group of colonists who are traditionally thought of as religious dissidents, but who clearly still think of themselves as loyal English subjects, whose project in settling what is now Massachusetts seems to be driven by both religious and nationalist aims, right? That they don't seem to be separating those two. Right. Very different from the John Prine song that we looked at last time, right? Where he's trying to uncouple ideas of nationalism and spirituality, right? Here, those two things are very, very closely intertwined. So this is the kind of thing that I want you all to be doing with assignment 1 on page 97, right? So if we just turn there for a second. So as you can probably tell, this book isn't 100% brand spanking new, right? It seems to assume that people still watch network television and don't just stream shit. And that people are reading or have access to highbrow magazines, or that they read that, or the local newspapers actually exist where you live. We actually do have a local newspaper, but it's pretty small and only comes out once a week. So when you're working on this assignment, in terms of your subject, okay, so changing trends in automobiles, that's fine, that's good, you can go with that. If you're looking at newspaper front pages, I'll say like any newspaper is good, right? But track it for a couple of days and see what the big what the big news story happens to be, right? So if you want to track the the Atlanta Journal-Constitution for a couple of days, or the New York Times or the Washington Post, right? It can be a bigger paper with a bigger circulation in the America's Times Reporter. If shows or advertisements that appear on network television as opposed to cable during 1 hour evening prime time, well, If you actually watch network primetime, go for it. If not, I would say like, ads that, maybe like ads that you see on, say, like Hulu versus ads that you see on YouTube would also work, right? And advertisements for Scotch whiskey and Rye Brown magazines. Revise that to any advertisement for the same kind of product on any platform, right? So it can be in magazines, it can be like if you're seeing online ads, right, for the same kind of product. Just like, think of it as like a static ad rather than like a film ad, right?
But
It's
we
like-
can do like anything, it doesn't have to be Scotch whiskey.
It does not have to be Scotch whiskey. No, it does not have to be Scotch whiskey, which is something that I imagine most of you probably know very little about. Yeah, you can use any set of ads that are about the same kind of product. Again, just like as long as it's like an image and text ad and not, not like a commercial. So does anybody have any questions about any of that? And I should be, I will be grading the assignment you're turning in tonight, tomorrow morning. So you should have feedback on that quickly. And remember to just go back and read the feedback that I gave you for the last assignment, try to apply that to the next one, right? And if you have trouble uploading something for any reason, like please just let me know. And I can't fix it because I don't understand Georgia View, but I'll do what I can for